it out. Car's up on jack stands. We got the old motor right here covered, just in case it rains. See there, bam, bam, bam. Got the newer motor up on the hoist right here. And we got the transmission over here pretty much almost complete. All we need to do is put the sealant on and the selector rod back into place, and the little clips up here and stuff like that. That's it. That's it. The sole reason that I am making this video, though, is for any of you who are going to get your hands dirty and do this job. This video is going to be about the things that I found while doing this job that might be helpful to you guys that other videos haven't really explained in their content. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you the things that I found that will be helpful and beneficial for you guys when you do this job. So let's get right into that. Number one, let's start off with removing the case. Now you're gonna, obviously there's other videos that show you to remove the clip and the cover and the seal washer up here. But the case from the factory is sealed with a sealant in between the cases right here. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to pry both cases off from each other. This is also really tight up here. And so what you want to do is you want to take a mallet, pretend this is a mallet right here, and hammer that pretty hard, or you can even use the bottom end and punch that in. And then you're going to want to get a pry tool and find a part on the transmission cases where they separate to pry up, pry up, pry up. And doing those things will help you get the seal to unseal itself from each other, and both cases will eventually pop off. So that's the number one thing to look out for. Just work your way, be gentle with it, but also put some force into it, but just don't break anything on the transmission case itself. The second thing you want to look out for once the transmission cases are apart, as you can see here, is you're going to want to inspect all the gears, make sure everything's good, that all the bearings and everything is in good working proper condition. I think that's pretty standard, but you're going to have to eventually take all of these gears out to access. This is the Wavetrac right here, but from the factory this would be the original open diff right sitting right here. And to take these gears out, the gravity of all these gears, they're all in there in all their specific spots, and they're heavy, so the gravity is going to make it really hard to like just pull them all out like this way. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tip it over, get a helping hand if you need to. You can do it one person job, but if you have a second person, it's helpful. Have a bench that you're working on, and then tip it over and let the gravity help you pull those gears out, and they'll eventually just slide right out. You just tip it over, everything will fall out. Make sure you have all the parts, you save all the parts, put them to the side, and then you'll have access to the open differential inside the 02Q transmission. Number three is going to be when you access your open differential, which is right here. This sits in place right there from the factory. We took the bearing off here, but obviously it has the bearing on the other side. All right. And when you access the open diff, let me switch this over. When you access the open diff, this pin gear is going to be connected to the open diff here, which you're going to need to remove to put onto the Wavetrac LSD, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the pin gear has some rivets attached to this, and you're going to need to use some drill bits to drill out the rivets. Either you can use some drill bits, which I'm sure most of us are going to be using, or you can get a vise and use a rivet hammer, like a hydraulic hammer, but I don't think most of us are going to have that. But that is definitely the easiest way. But the drill method is you're going to use 2 drill bits. I only use 2, one smaller one and then one larger one. Just make sure that the larger one is not bigger than the diameter of this hole, because you do not want to drill larger than that hole, because then that will affect the gear and you might ruin it. So you're going to use the smaller one first, drill it, then you use the bigger one, and you're probably just going to want to get it just enough down in there to where you'll be able to take like a chisel tool and a hammer and chisel the rivets out. Make sure that there's like no car window or anything this way, because when you chisel it out and it shoots off, it could break a window. They shoot off really far. So that's how you're going to get that. And then the rest of the rivet is going to be stuck in here. Just take like a punch tool like we have here, let's see, like this punch tool here. Just take a punch tool and a hammer and punch it through right there, and it will come right out. That is how we got those out. And then once those are out, you'll be able to have access to the ring gear here, and be able to put it onto the new Wavetrac LSD. So that was number 3. Number 4 on the things that you're going to need to pay attention to is when you now have access to the open diff inside your transmission here. There's going to be a bearing on this side, and there's going to be a bearing on this side. All right, we took this one off, but there are bearings on there, and those 2 bearings are not the same. They have different part numbers. And so before you do this job, you're going to want to purchase 2 new bearings, which are these ones right here, to be installed on your Wavetrac differential. And you can find that online. But those 2 bearings are gonna, their part numbers are gonna match up with the part numbers on this. So when you remove this, you can see the part numbers on here, and you're just going to take your new part numbers and make sure that the new bearing goes onto the right spot onto your Wavetrac differential. You do not want to put them in the wrong spot, because then that will screw up everything. And once a bearing is on the new differential, they're really hard to pull off without ruining them, and you might have to buy a new one. So just make sure that you are putting the bearings in the right locations. And that also goes along with the races. Obviously, there's a race under there in that one, but the race that sits on this one sits on top here, and it's right here. So from the factory, this also has a race. You're going to need to make sure that the races are put in the correct spot and that they're matched up with the bearing, because the races, like this race, would not be able to match with the bottom bearing down here, and the other race would not be able to match with the wrong bearing. So just make sure that they're matched up correctly. Make sure that you're doing that right, because they are not the same part number. Number 5 thing that you're going to want to do is how to install the races and the bearings onto the differential. All right, so to remove the races, we just basically, this is the side that has the shim. Actually, there's a shim in there that you can't really see, but it's in there. And it's really, really tight. As you can see that, it's really, really tight. So it's hard to fit like a race puller tool in there and actually get it out. It's just not enough space. And so what we did on both of these, this one as well, because the gears wouldn't be in there at this point, neither would the differential be in there. You'll have access to the race, but they're the same process. Basically, we took let's see here, we took like a screwdriver with a really thin tip, a really thin flathead tip, and we put it in there like so, like way in there like that. And we kind of, just tap, lightly around. Don't do it hard, but tap lightly around. Once the race is a little bit pushed out from its original spot, you could probably get like a thicker flathead or something that's not gonna like damage anything, and just tap lightly around it, and eventually that race will fall out. So that's how you get the races out. Now, in regards to the bearings, how to get those onto the differential, there's actually a few ways that you can do it. One way is you can use a press and put those on. You just need to make sure that you have the right diameter of tool to press it on, or else you're going to screw that bearing up and it might actually break. But I understand that not everyone has a press available at their house. But 2 things that mostly everyone has at their house is a freezer and an oven. And so what you can do is you can throw your Wavetrac LSD into the freezer. You can do it for like 3 to 4 hours. What we did is we put it in there for like 4 or 5 days. 3 or 4 hours should suffice. Put it in the freezer for 3 to 4 hours. And then your bearings you can throw in the oven at 400 degrees for like 20 to 30 minutes. So when this is ready to pull out of the freezer and the bearings are ready to pull out of the oven, you take the Wavetrac differential out of the freezer and set it on the counter, and then you get some tongs. Do not pick these up from the oven because then you'll burn your hand. Very, very hot. You'll just take some tongs and you'll set these right into place, and they'll literally fall right into place. Make sure you do it fast, because once they're in place, they literally will not remove again. Once this is warm enough and once this is cool enough, it's just going to stick there. And it's literally seconds. Like once it's in place, you're not going to be able to remove it. So, but that is the fastest way that we found out. It literally just fell right into place. It was pretty awesome. So highly recommend that to get the bearings onto the new differential. And once they're set in place, they're there and you don't have to worry about it anymore. So that was number 5. Number 6 is going to be regarding the ARP bolts that get pressed into the Wavetrac differential here. Now you can use a press. We used a press because we had one in the backyard here at my buddy's house where we were doing all this work. But we used a press to press them in, and they were going in pretty smooth, but then the press would get really, really, really tight, and my buddy was cranking on that press, and these bolts were just not going in flush at all. There was a few millimeter thick of gap between it being pressed all the way down onto the Wavetrac diff and not being pressed. So we were like, crap, dude. And we didn't want to go any further with the hydraulic press because we didn't want to break anything, because if you break anything, it's very expensive to replace. Even these bolts are not cheap. So what we decided to do is we decided to press in all of these bolts as far as we could with the hydraulic press. If you don't have a press, you can use like a hammer or something like that, and a socket tool. Just be gentle with it. And then we put the ring gear onto the Wavetrac LSD, and then we set the ring gear and the LSD on top of a vise, so it's sitting flat just like it is right here. And I was holding it into place with 2 hands, and he took a socket and he hammered those down. And those hard punches with the hammer and the socket were able to get those ARP bolts all the way flat down. You want to make sure that they're all flush, right? Like these are all flush. If they're not flush and you go to install them, then you're going to have eventually one of those bolts work themselves out and start spinning, and you're going to have major issues in your transmission. So you want them all flush. Do not move on to the next step without putting those all flush to the Wavetrac LSD. And that's the way we did it. So we used a little socket tool and a hammer and just poop, 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 and did them all. And we just did it multiple times to make sure that they were all flushed. Because on the back side is a nut, and they only get torqued to 40 foot-pounds, which is not that much. So it's only 40 foot-pounds to torque the nut on the other side. So you want to make sure that they're flush and torqued correctly. So that was number 6. Number 7 is going to be in regards to the grinding inside this. Now, when all of these are apart, I'm not going to take it apart so you can't really see it here, but underneath here there's a part of the transmission case that you're going to have to grind off the transmission in order for the Wavetrac LSD to sit in there without any grinding or binding issues. So you're going to want to grind that off as much as you can without this binding on there. And one way to check it without it binding, all of these gears will be out at this time. These won't, just picture these out of your mind off this, and you're just setting this in. So when you grind it and then you clean it out, make sure you clean it out with some like brake cleaner, because there's going to be a lot of little metal particles in there, and you don't want to set the Wavetrac LSD in there with all those metal particles and get some metal up in there. So clean it out, and then use a little I don't know if we have it over here. We don't, but if you have a little paint tool, if not, go grab one at AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whatever. Have a little paint marker tool and paint that spot, you know, put a little paint on there, and then set the Wavetrac LSD in there. And then you'll set this transmission case on top. Then you're gonna put the bolts, all these little holes right here are bolts. You're gonna bolt it down, and then you're going to access the Wavetrac LSD, which is gonna be through this little part. And you're gonna wanna spin it. If it can spin freely with your hand, that means all of your races are installed all the way, which is this right here. All of your races are installed all the way down. Also want to make sure that you're installing those all the way down. They go to a stopping point, so when you're pressing those in, which I'll talk on the next point, make sure you're pressing them in. But you'll want to spin this. You'll want to make sure it's spinning freely. Have this kind of sitting off like this, the edge of your table, and spin it. And then go underneath, and you'll hear a tick, 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 tick. That means that there's no play in it, because you've taken the shim out at this point, because you're going to want to use your dial indicator to measure for the clearance for the new shim. So yeah, make sure that that is spinning freely. And then after you've figured that that's spinning freely, then you're going to take the transmission case off and check that paint to see if the Wavetrac has any paint on it. If it does have any paint on it, that means that you need to grind just a little bit more, because there's still a little bit of binding on there. You want to grind that until there is zero binding, there is zero resistance with the spinning of the Wavetrac LSD in there, because if there's any grinding or spinning, when you put all this back together, then it's just going to grind up metal, things are going to bind, and the transmission is not going to work correctly. So do that. This leads us to number 8. If there is any binding, you're going to want to check your races. Make sure that your races are pressed in all the way. Get yourself a Harbor Freight or on Amazon a race press tool. They're like 20 or 30 bucks, not that expensive, but they are awesome. And I got myself one, and the races just went in perfectly smooth with that race press tool. Just look it up, 20, 30 bucks, not a big deal. But you want to make sure that the races are pressed in all the way. They do have a stopping point on both of them, the one underneath here and the one over here. So press them in all the way. That's the first thing that you want to check. The second thing you want to check is that your races are in their correct orientation and spot. Okay, so that they're not backwards and they are in the right location, meaning this race is not put in that one and that race is not put in this one. Put them in their correct location, because they are not the same. They're slightly different from each other. Third thing you're going to want to check is your bearings on your Wavetrac LSD, like I explained before. Make sure that your bearings are the right bearings in the right location and that they are pressed in all the way, okay? So that's the third thing you want to check. And if all of those are good, the fourth thing you want to check is the grinding spot. Okay, so if you're getting any grinding or binding when the transmission case is on and you're spinning the Wavetrac LSD in there, that's the last thing you want to check. You want to check all those things, and then you want to check the grinding spot. When I was doing this job and I put the LSD in here, I put the case back on and I bolted it all together, I actually wasn't getting any spinning with the Wavetrac. So I double checked the races and the bearings, made sure they were pressed in all the way and that they were all in the right location, as they were. And so we were like, what the heck is going on? I don't see any marks on the Wavetrac, but that's the only thing that I can think of, is that we didn't grind down that little part on the transmission far enough. So we ground down a little bit more, cleaned it out, put the case back on, and bolted it together, and then we brought it over and we were able to spin the Wavetrac freely. So it definitely was that we didn't grind down that part far enough. So that's what I'm saying, is put that paint on there, because if you are getting any binding and all the races and the bearings are in the right spot and you're still getting binding or grinding, then that paint should indicate that you have not ground down that part far enough. So grind it, make sure you're grinding it down far enough, and just have the clearance that you need for the new Wavetrac LSD to sit in. Number 9 is going to be in regards to your dial indicator. Make sure you have a dial indicator for this, because you're going to need to measure the play that the Wavetrac LSD has in order to find the right shim to put inside this one. Remember, the shim goes in this casing. So whatever this one looks like to you, all right, the shim goes under this race here. And you'll know that because when you remove the old race, the shim will be there that you'll also remove. But this is going to be in regards to the dial indicator. And you're going to want to make sure that you check what your dial indicator reads. So mine reads here 0.001 inch to 1.0 inch. So what that means is every single little notch here, little notch, that is 1/1000th of an inch indication. And then the 0 to the 10 means 1 inch. All right, so that's what this dial indicator indicates. Your dial indicator might not indicate the same thing, so make sure you're checking your dial indicator when you are setting this up. I figured out what 1/1000th of an inch is in millimeters, and you're just going to have to figure out the math on the play that you have regarding that. As far as setting it up, you're just going to have to figure it out on the transmission. I have a little part in my last video regarding my Wavetrac install that talks about this and how I actually set it up on my transmission when I use the dial indicator, so you can go back and check that part of the video out. Now, the 10th and the final thing that I think will be beneficial for any of you to look for while doing this job is when you are at the point of all of that stuff is done, okay, and you're at the point of putting your gears back into the transmission. Now, obviously, you're going to set your Wavetrac LSD in there first. That's the first part that goes in there. All right, make sure it's freely spinning, okay. The second part that I put in there, and it actually was pretty easy for us. It took us maybe 5-10 minutes to actually put them all in there, and they all lined up. So what I started was with the Wavetrac LSD. Then I installed the input shaft, which is this one right here. Let me see here. Right there. Okay. Right there. I installed the input shaft gear right here. And what I noticed is that the input shaft sits on the transmission case. And so I was wondering for the longest time, is that normal? Is it supposed to sit on there? Because if you spin it, it actually grinds off some of the transmission case. There's a bearing under here that it sits inside. And I was like, is it really supposed to sit on the transmission case? Because that just doesn't seem right. But after talking to some other guys on Instagram that have done this job, that have videos on YouTube with this job, he explained to me that is normal. And actually, when you put the case all back together with the shim and the spring-loaded clip and everything, that actually brings this up. So you can see here. See that? It brings it up and it's not binding there. So that's that. But that if you see that is normal. Just try not to spin it. Like I said, this is the second gear that I put on after the Wavetrac. And then I put this one on here. Make sure that you have the shifters on there correctly. You put that one in there. And then we put this one in there. And they're all kind of sitting at an angle. Not all perfectly flush. They're kind of sitting sideways a little bit. So after this one, we put this one in. And then we put this one in last. And then we kind of just all put it together, and they fell into place, and everything works spinning just fine. And so that's the last thing to look for. This right here is normal if it's sitting on there. It's going to be brought up when you put all the stuff back together, so that's not going to be an issue. So if you see that, don't freak out. It's perfectly fine. It's normal. But yeah, that's going to be the last thing there. And I think that will be beneficial for anyone putting this together, because yeah, it's not one of those jobs that's like, oh, I'm just going to do it myself and it's going to be a few hours. Though this has taken us literally like 3 to 4 days of just kind of like doing it here and there and figuring things out and having some hiccups along the run. Honestly, if I did this a second time, I could easily get this done in a day. But you got to have the right tools. You got to have the right mindset to get it done, and you got to know what you're doing. So I'm hoping that this video really explained the things that I felt like I ran into on this that put me back so much time because you're trying to figure it out and no one else online really had any explanation on it. So I want to make this video for you, anyone who wants to tackle this job, or any like shop owners that are figuring this out, doing it for a first time or whatever. You can come back and look at this video and be like, okay, this is this, and you just do this and this and this, and it's not that big of a deal. So that's that. And so I'm gonna leave this video at that. Thank you for all of you who have stuck around on my channel. I appreciate all the support and the sharing and the liking and the disliking and the commenting that you've done. Thank you for all of you who are new to my channel and have subscribed to my channel. That's awesome. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like my content and have viewed it, at least give it a like or something like that. I'm not saying subscribe. I'm like, I don't want to be like all those other guys, but if you feel like you want to subscribe to my channel, go for it. I really appreciate it. In my next video, I'm going to be showing you some things on my new motor that I found out that are pretty cool, but that is going to be in the next video. All right, thank you guys again for watching my video and supporting my channel, and until the next video, peace.